All right, welcome everyone, and welcome to our session on apps, tools, and tactics to automate and accelerate hybrid work. We are excited to be with you here today. So we're going to go ahead and get moving here. And as we get moving, we want to invite folks to join us over into the chat. Let us know where you are joining us from. Are you in Denver? Are you in another place in the world? Let us know where you're joining us from. And if you have a favorite app or tool that's really working for you in this season of life and work, you can let us know about that favorite app or tool also in the chat. I see Jenny kicking us off. I see Jason also, Christian as well, with lots of folks joining us over into the chat. So let us know where you're joining us from, your favorite app or tool for this particular season of life and work. And we're going to go ahead and get moving here. And as we do that, I want to share a little bit about the context in which we're gathering is that this is a hybrid session. And that's just a reflection of the fact that the world has changed. We have experienced a lot over the last several years. And I know that many of us have gone through this seesaw of emotions, through the ups and through the downs, and things have changed, right? And so part of this session that we're going to be talking about today is that while things have changed, and while there's still lots of uncertainty and things that we have yet to learn, we have lots of exciting ways that we can adapt to the way in which the world has changed, in which the way we live and work continues to change. So we're excited to do that with you. And with that, I'll say that a little bit quickly about who I am. So I am Meico with Whitlock, and I am the founder and CEO of an organization called Mindful Techie that works with organizations and teams all around the world to help you to, as a change maker, increase your well-being so that you can increase your well-doing. Have been a part of the Intent community for many, many years and have had the privilege of also serving on the board alongside Jason as well. So I'll kick it over to Jason to let us know a little bit about him and what to expect for this session.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Jason Shim, and I serve as the Chief Digital Officer of the Canadian Centre for Nonprofit Digital Resilience, or CINDR. And our organization aims to provide sectoral level interventions around tech and data to help nonprofits across Canada as well to use tech and data more effectively. And I'm looking forward to sharing many of the tools that have had the opportunity to try out over the last little while, and also to hear from all of you as well around some of the tools that you've been using too. So in terms of what to expect, this will be a fast-paced presentation where there will be a variety of apps, tools, and tactics that you can use. There'll be quick and rapid bites of information that you can take home and explore, along with some commentary from both Meico and I on each of the tools that we introduce. And I'll toss it over to Meico.
Awesome. So as we get started, I want to let folks know that I have an app directory that I'm working on that will include many of these tools. And so if you're interested in learning more about those and having those all in one place, it's a free access to that. You can join the email list. So that's mindfultechie.com/free. And when you join using that link, you'll also get a copy of the workbook that's on the left, which is the Work-Life, Tech-Life Balance Assessment. So for folks that are interested in that, that's something that you're interested in, I'm happy to share that with folks. Just use the link to sign up and you'll be alerted once that directory goes live. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and get moving here with a chat question, and we're going to move forward. But we have a chat question for you as you all are introducing yourselves, letting us know about your biggest, your favorite app or tool for this season. Respond to this prompt. So my biggest challenge with hybrid work is, so take a moment to reflect on that and let us know what your biggest challenge is with hybrid work right now is in the chat. And as you do that, before we jump into the apps and the tools, I want to share just a few things that we're seeing across the board in terms of organizations and challenges. We want to share also some frameworks, and then we're going to use that to really ground us in how do we find the tools that are going to be the most relevant and useful for us. So if that sounds good, I see lots of folks are chiming into the chat, letting us know about their challenges, introducing themselves. We want to invite you to keep that energy going. And as we do that, I want to share a little bit about what we're seeing in terms of the challenges. And so here are the top things that I have seen with the teams and organizations that I'm working with. And of course, there are many more than just these four, but I want to highlight these four. So first, there is the uncertainty, right? So we know that with the pandemic, and even as we settle into whatever this next normal is, there's been a lot of uncertainty and a lot of disruption, which has made planning difficult and challenging. It has disrupted our routines, and that absence of predictability has had a negative impact on our mental and emotional health and well-being and our productivity, both personally and professionally. And in the short term, we do very well with this, but we know from the human perspective over the long term, this can have a negative impact. And so we are challenged with how do we manage that, especially when it seems like we're experiencing what some call ambiguous loss, right? Where that we're experiencing losses, we're experiencing changes and transition, and there is no closure, right? There isn't certainty, right? Uncertainty seems to have become a norm for many of us. And then we have the collaboration and technology overload piece. So for many of us, during the pandemic in particular, if we weren't accustomed to working in a remote or hybrid fashion, we've had to duct tape together systems to get them to work, to stay engaged, to stay productive, to serve our clients and our members. But the result of that has meant that we're spending more time than perhaps ever before in front of our screens. And we're probably using more tools than ever before to keep all of those things going, right? So there's this overload piece that many of us are dealing with. And then there's the work-life balance piece. So I'm looking at the chat. Lots of folks are talking about work-life balance, or really the lack thereof, all the things sort of blurring together. And so that is something that I think is all too common for many of us, especially in the change-making sector. And then the last point that I'll make here is about hypercomplexity, right? So some folks call this hypercomplexity. Journalist Thomas Friedman refers to this as the age of acceleration. And that's just really a reflection of the fact that if you feel like the world has sped up, right, that we're experiencing more changes and at a more rapid pace, that is not your imagination, right? Technology is changing at a very rapid pace. We're seeing changes in the economy. We're seeing changes politically around the world very rapidly. And that change is unrelenting, right? But what is not keeping up with that is the fact that we have a finite amount of time, attention, and resource. And so we have to make some very conscious and intentional decisions about where we're going to place our time and our energy, given the fact that we can't keep up with all of those changes at the same pace because we're not robots, right? We're not automatons. And then we layer on top of this, and let me know if this actually resonates with you, something that I call IDD, or intention deficit disorder. So IDD, or intention deficit disorder. And this is essentially where we might lack clarity about what we're doing from moment to moment. And we're busy, right? We're checking things off the list, but we're not necessarily doing those with intention. And so we have questions about whether or not we're actually making an impact, all right? So maybe you experience this where you wake up first thing in the morning, for example, before you roll out of bed, you're on your phone, you're checking emails, you're responding to text messages, you're going through your mental checklist. You have that anxiety about all the things that are coming at you even before you've actually started your workday, right? So if this resonates with you, let me know if this resonates with you. Maybe you have a friend for whom this is true, right? You can let us know in the chat if this is true for you. So these are some things that we're seeing in terms of challenges. And I see in the chat that many of the things that you all have shared seem to really connect deeply with some of these. And many of you have shared other things as well connected to that. So with that being said, we talked about challenges. I think we're all on the same page about some of the challenges that we're dealing with. And it looks like folks are really resonating also with the IDD. Let's talk a little bit about frameworks, and then we'll kick things off with some apps. So first things first, in terms of frameworks and really figuring out how we can make the most of the apps that we're going to be talking about, is a framework from a colleague that Jason and I have had the privilege of working with and serving with, Beth Cantor, who talks about this idea of working asynchronously versus working ASAP, right? One of the things that's happened with our increase in connectivity, with the collaboration and tech overload piece, is that we are expecting people to be available 24/7. We're expecting a rapid response to emails and to those chat messages. We're expecting people to essentially be on call 24/7. And sometimes this is unspoken. And what this framework really asks us to think about is that there are two ways of thinking about working and collaborating, right? There is asynchronous work, where we're able to agree on what we're working on, but the work is set up in such a way that we're able to do it on our own timelines, do it in different geographic locations, and it doesn't have to necessarily be real time, right? So for example, with Jason and I, we worked on this presentation. We had Zoom meetings, but then between the Zoom meetings, we worked asynchronously in Google Slides to put the content together. That's one example of that. And then on the synchronous side, there are going to be necessary times where we have to work in real time to have a rapid exchange of ideas, to brainstorm, to talk about things that are very sensitive in nature, for example, things that might be too emotionally charged to talk about via email, for example. And so Jason and I did a combination of both of those in preparation for this section. So the invitation here is to think about when it's appropriate for you and your team to work synchronously in real time, and when is it appropriate and okay and actually makes more sense for you to work asynchronously. I think many of us have defaulted because we're so used to having so many meetings to working synchronously, but sometimes our work actually lends itself to being a mix of having a balanced mix of the both, and not necessarily leaning to one end or the other. Something else that is critically important is for us to understand the difference between what is urgent and important, right? So I talked about previously that we are living in a time where we are experiencing hypercomplexity that shows no signs of easing up anytime soon. And so in order for us to make the most of this, we have to be clear about what we have the capacity to do in any particular moment and what is actually urgent and important for us to do in any particular moment. So I present to you as a tool to help you with that, my version of what some people refer to as the Eisenhower matrix that really just helps you to understand the difference between urgent and important and where to focus your time and energy. So first bucket here is really crises. These are both personal and professional. These are fires that you want to put out immediately. These are things that you need to stop and actually do those now. And one of the challenges that we have is that for many of us, we feel like most of the things that we have on our plates actually fall into this category. And the danger of staying in this place is that we don't have the space or the capacity to take on anything else. So we want to be mindful of that. The second thing is if we move to the bottom right, you want to focus on after you've addressed the fires, eliminating those distractions, right? Eliminating those things that get in the way. We just talked about synchronous versus asynchronous, for example. So getting good at understanding that, you might realize, oh, actually some of these things could be asynchronous. And so therefore I can free up some time to be able to work on some of these other buckets, right? Number three, so bottom left, we're talking about things that can be delegated, automated, and renegotiated. And so the bulk of today's session, we're going to be talking about apps and tools and strategies to help you to do that. And then once you've done these three things, the final bucket allows you to really focus on your long-term impact, right? So these are the things that in an ideal world, I think for many of us, when we think about long-term impact, both personally and professionally, these are things that are predictable, things that can be scheduled. And when we can really critically address the other three buckets, then we have time to focus on where I believe you can make the most impact, which is in this fourth quadrant here. So these are just some frameworks for you to be thinking about as you think about that. Something else I want to share with you as we move forward here is about doing a detox or doing an audit of where you are in terms of your tools. So I mentioned during the pandemic that we have increased screen time. For many of us, we've increased the amount of tools that we're using. And so this is, as we settle into this next new normal for our work, an opportunity for us to think about, okay, we're using Dropbox, we're using Google Drive, we're using Microsoft Teams to store things. All of that worked for us as we were trying to figure out how to make things hybrid and remote and stay connected and stay engaged and serve our clients. But do we actually need all three of those things right now? Do we need to think differently about how we're using those tools? Do we need a different tech stack? Specifically when it talks about communication tools, project management tools, document storage, calendars, appointment scheduling. If you're using multiple different versions of that and you're not clear about why you're doing that, this could be an opportunity as a team and as an organization to really take an opportunity to do an audit of those and to figure out how you make adjustments, including to notifications, for example. You know, do you need to get a notification every time someone's uploading something to Asana or whatever it might be? So an opportunity for you to do an audit and to do a detox where it might make sense for you to do that. All right, so that was a lot, that was a mouthful. And so I wanna know, we're gonna get ready to rock and roll and into the tools. And so if you have a question about anything we've shared so far, you can put your questions into the chat. But more importantly, I have a question for you. So if you're ready to rock and roll, to dive into the tools, give us a yes or a thumbs up or ready in the chat and let us know if you're ready to rock and roll. And we'll get moving into this first set of tools that we have here. I'm seeing the thumbs up roll in. All right, I'm feeling the energy and the excitement. I'm loving it. So let's keep that energy moving. Awesome. All right, so let's go ahead and dive into this first set of tools. And so this first set of tools is really meant to help us to tackle the biggest distractions that we have that we commonly see in the workplace. So let's start with meetings, right? How many of us have had a meeting where we said, "Oh my God, this could have been an email. Like, why am I here?" And you're thinking about, and you have anxiety about all the other things that you're not able to do because you're sitting in this meeting that is not necessarily the best use of your time, your energy, and your resources, right? Well, here are some tools and here's some ways you can think about before, during, and after your meeting to actually make that experience more seamless. So let's start with the first tool on the left, Calendly. There are tools like Calendly, Acuity Scheduling, and some of the other amazing tools I think Jason's going to talk about later that's built into some of the calendaring systems that you're already using that allows you to essentially schedule time with people without having to go back and forth, right? How many times have we gone back and forth trying to find the perfect time and we waste so much time doing that? Well, what if you could just share your calendar and have people select a time or vice versa and speed up that process, right? So powerful tools like that that can help you on the front end as you're scheduling meetings to find the right time for everyone, save you time with that. And one caveat here is you want to be mindful of the context in which you're using this. This is not appropriate for all stakeholders. And so if you're going to be using this, particularly for external stakeholders like board members or funders, you want to have a discussion internally about whether it's appropriate and how you actually use it. Because believe it or not, some people are actually offended if you send a link to your calendar without providing any additional context. So you want to make sure that you are clear about that as you're thinking about that. Bonjoro, Vidyard, and Vidcast are also things that we are really interested in sharing with you as well. All three of these are very similar. They're competitors, and they essentially are video tools that allow you to send short videos back and forth in lieu of perhaps sending an email, for example. It can be an opportunity to explain something that might be complicated. So if you're having a tech issue and you want to get support with resolving that tech issue without going back and forth over email, it can be one of the ways to do that. You can use it to thank funders, right? To send out a video thank you as opposed to sending out an email or a snail mail letter. It can be an opportunity, for example, to get everyone on the same page before a meeting where you actually do a visual walkthrough of the agenda by recording yourself and the actual screen sharing the agenda so that you can jump right in before when the meeting actually starts. So there's some really creative ways that you can think about that as well. And so during the meeting, some things you can do to make the meeting interactive. I'm a big fan of Slido. I use that a lot in my presentations. Mentimeter is also a very powerful tool to do interactive polling and some other things that are beyond what the built-in features in a platform like Zoom allows you to do. And then, of course, thinking about whether or not it makes sense to have cameras on or cameras off, right? I know that many of us are trying to bridge that gap from having been in person for so long before the pandemic. And there's this false notion that being on camera means that you're being more engaged, right? But the reality is that the research shows from Stanford University that that is not necessarily true. That we know that being on too many camera mediated interactions, especially back to back, has a negative impact on your mental and emotional ability to process in the moment. It has an impact on your energy levels, and overall, it can actually reduce productivity. And so the ask here is to be mindful about when you're asking people to be on camera versus off camera, or whether it's optional. Being clear about your intention. Is it an accessibility thing, and you're trying to make sure that everyone, or you maybe have someone who's hard of hearing is able to read lips? Are you using it to foster a certain type of connection during a part of the meeting? Being clear about that, putting it in the meeting invite, putting it in the agenda, letting people know, and letting people know about that as well. And then ultimately treating people like adults, right? If you're clear about the intention, if the meeting is actually meaningful and beneficial, then people are going to be there. They're going to be engaged and they're going to pay attention. All right. And so someone is looking for the study for that. So I can share some resources related to that as well in terms of the linking specifically to those for folks that are interested in that. And then finally, afterwards, you have tools like Otter AI and a couple other tools that we're going to talk about that allow you to do real time and also asynchronous transcription of meetings. And you have tools like ChatGPT, which allow you to then do a high level summary, right? So you can put your transcript into ChatGPT and have it to generate Okay, give me the top 5 action items from this meeting based on this transcript. Give me the top 5 things based on this from this transcript. There are many really important things that you can use in terms of those creative ways that you can use tools for to do those things. So if you have other thoughts, you have other tools related to this set of meetings, would love to hear from you in the chat how you all are thinking about that. Next up, in terms of distractions, email, right? How many of us are dealing with huge email distractions, right? So the first thing I want to talk about here is the idea of pre-scheduling emails that you're sending out during non-business hours, traditional non-business hours that don't require an urgent response, right? Many of us are perhaps working at odd hours. And one of the things I'm conscious of is making sure that if I'm working outside of non-traditional business hours, that I'm pre-scheduling emails as opposed or leaving them in draft form to send out later, because it creates unnecessary background stress for the person that's receiving it. And it also can set up the false expectation that you're going to be available to respond 24/7, right? And so even if you tell people not to respond and it's not urgent, one of two things I've seen is going to happen. One, the person, because of their personality type, they feel the need to respond. And so they can't really focus unless they do it in the moment. So they're going to interrupt their dinner. They're going to interrupt their time with the family to respond right away. Or they're going to heed your advice and wait until the next day or the next couple of days and respond. But they're carrying that stress meanwhile with them in the background. So there are many powerful tools that you can do that are built into many of the major platforms that allow you to do this. And so inviting folks to take advantage of those. And then the second column here is all about making sure that you're not spending all your time sorting emails, right? And so this is really about making sure that you are positioning yourself in such a way that you have an opportunity to sorting your emails in such a way that you have an opportunity with the buckets that I was showing on the screen, that you have things pre-sorted and filters. For example, you have sorters for your notifications, for example. For me, for like Google Docs, for example, with newsletters, receipts for like, for Uber, things like that. All of those things I have set up and pre-sorted, so I don't have to spend time sorting those things. So those are things that I don't need access to immediately. That way, when I'm looking at my inbox, I can focus on the things that are going to be more likely to require my immediate attention. And I'm going to turn it over to Jason, who's going to tell us about another thing you can use in terms of emails with Power Automate for folks that are not familiar with that.
Yeah, so for Power Automate, it can be a really powerful tool for email, particularly for routing notifications. And so with Power Automate, you can set certain settings where, if there's certain subject lines, or if you are processing, form messages or things, or you need to extract attachments every time something, like, pretty much if you can describe it, you can probably set up a workflow in Power Automate to deal with the emails. So what I found this particularly helpful for is on occasions when, if an email address has been set up where people are sending in like attachments and such, that Power Automate can be really useful for extracting those attachments to a folder, so it's all ready and ready to go for later processing as well.
Awesome. And so something that's connected to this in terms of distractions, one of the biggest things that we see in the workplace is sometimes not understanding what your top priorities are, or understanding what your highest intention is, can be a major distraction as well. And so a couple of thoughts about how we can deal with this. One is a method they call the Pomodoro method. This is essentially a productivity method where you break up your work into short sprints, and you build in short sprints, and then you build in breaks. And that way, for me, I find that you're able to focus in an undistracted way on the task at hand. And you're also remember to take those important breaks that you need to take in order to recharge and recover, because we know that the breaks are important. And so if that is a productivity strategy that resonates and that makes sense for you, I want to recommend two apps that connect with that. So if we're looking at the middle column, Flow app, and Flow, the Flow app for Mac is what I use. I have a Mac, so Flow app is what I use built in. You can download this and install it on your computer, and it installs a little timer at the top of your taskbar to allow you to set up your Pomodoros and to time yourself. and to stay on track. And then there's also the Pomodoro website for folks that whatever device you're using, if you just pop open a web browser, you can use that as well. And then there's a handful of tools that Jason's going to tell us about on the right side that you can also use.
Yeah, so the first two are very similar. There's Motion and Reclaim AI, and I thank you, Danielle, for writing about Reclaim as well in the chat. So what these are is that these are two apps that allow you to, they have multiple functionalities. One of them is to make calendar scheduling easier. So Motion in particular, you know how sometimes when you get a Calendly link and it can seem like a little bit impersonal there. What Motion does is that it actually gives you a couple of options where it gives you the link and it'll generate text that you copy and paste to indicate like, hey, does this do these days and these times work for you in text format? And you can click directly on the times and it'll help you book and schedule. It also allows you to manage multiple calendars. So if you're trying to book multiple people on your team with someone that you're trying to meet externally, that is helpful too. The one feature across Motion and Reclaim that is particularly helpful is that for managing tasks and task lists. So Reclaim has more integrations, but with other apps, say like Asana and such. But say you have a list of tasks that you need to do. Motion and Reclaim will allow you to designate, I think that this task will, take about half hour, an hour, so on and so forth. And then it'll actually auto time block for you. So time blocking in general is a great tactic for making sure that you have that you're blocking off time to get stuff done, but also that you are have a sense of what your available resourcing is. Motion and Reclaim take it one step further in that it will time block it on individual tasks, and if a meeting comes up that needs to go in, it'll actually reschedule your entire calendar around that particular meeting, so that instead of having to rearrange all your time blocks because something came up, because let's face it, stuff does come up along the way that you have to rebalance your entire calendar. Most have functionality that will manage it for you, so it saves a ton of time scheduling and playing calendar Tetris. FocusMate is a tool that is helpful for along the lines of time blocking, but it's also around external accountability. So for FocusMate, there is a free option where you can use it. I believe it's a few times a week before having to pay for a subscription. I believe it's under $10 a month for it. And what it does is it pairs you up with someone, and essentially you're looking at someone else as you're doing the work, but you state your intention as to what you would like to complete within the next half hour or an hour. There's a lot of graduate students that use the platform as well, and if it's helpful for you as well to have that kind of external accountability piece, and having essentially a partner to quietly work with, FocusMate can be helpful in that regard. And Brain FM is a tool that has beats in the background that help with focus as well. So that's another platform that folks may find helpful. Yes, body doubling. Thank you. Next up here for travel admin, this is an oldie but goodie, TripIt. So for anyone who's managing a whole bunch of emails around hotel bookings and flights and such, or whatever you're having to deal with relating to travel, TripIt is a great resource in that once you have it set up, there's an email address, plans@tripit.com, that you can forward all your stuff to, and it will automatically create the itinerary and manage all the various pieces of information that are coming in, so that you have it all in one place. So this is great, for anyone who's doing traveling or conference traveling as well, and taking care of things like the receipts for later submission and expense claiming. Next up, I'm going to talk a bit about security. So, this is super important, especially when looking at hybrid work. And so if you're not already, definitely check out the usage of password managers. So, a couple that are out there, 1Password as well as Bitwarden. And one of the things that is helpful around password management is that this allows you to have a different password for every site, and then you use a central password to access all of them. And so what that does is that should a password ever should any of the the apps that you use ever be breached from a password standpoint, that it's limited to just that website, and because you're using a different password for every single site. If you are using shared passwords across websites, that is definitely something to consider no longer doing, because that poses potential security risks in that regard. And thank you, Martin. Yes, glad to hear that 1Password has worked well for your various teams as well. And yes, if you're sending spreadsheets of passwords and such, keep in mind that a password manager may be a better route around that. If you don't have multi-factor authentication turned on already for many of your web apps, consider turning it on, because this will help address the vast majority of compromises that are seen, because it requires that you have a password and you have to have a second layer of authentication. So the big ones out there are Microsoft Authenticator, Google Authenticator, as well as Authy, which is made by Twilio. And so what these are is that it's an app on your phone that you would check, and you put in like a 6-digit code, or sometimes it's a longer string of digits, and it ensures that in addition to the password, you also have a device that you're keeping on you. If you're using a text message based authentication for these passcodes, and there is multi-factor, if there is like app based authentication that's available, I would suggest going the app based route if possible. Text based authentication, it can be compromised if someone does a SIM swap type attack and gets access to your SIM card to change out where the text messages are routed, and you can have more security using one of the authenticators there. 1Password as well also does have nonprofit discounts. You just have to let them know to request it. And finally, giving a heads up on security keys. So Yubico makes physical security keys that you can keep on a keychain, and so that ensures that you have to have this physical device on you to plug in, and you tap each time you log in, and this is even more secure in that regard, for providing that peace of mind for access to accounts. So if these options are available for any of the apps or web apps that you use, I definitely recommend enabling them.
Jason, could I make one point
yes,
really
totally.
quickly?
Yeah.
So that the cost has come up a little bit in the chat, and I want to just make the point that many of the tools that we're sharing are either they have a free version, or there's a low cost in terms of starting, and so folks were asking about that. Then the second thing I want to encourage folks to do is to check whatever platform you're interested in working with, even if you already have platforms right now, to make sure that you're maximizing the nonprofit discount. Many of these services offer that, even if they aren't advertising it. So if you reach out to the support team or to the sales team and ask, is there a nonprofit discount? Many times there is, and there's a really simple process for getting access to that particular discount. Just wanted to make that point.
Great, thank you. And next up, for secure messaging. So, we have our typical kind of day-to-day messaging that you may be using, across tools like Slack or say Teams. However, if you're looking for a privacy-focused messaging app, so say you need to send, something like a password or something like that, needs a disappearing message afterwards, and you're trying to find like an easy way to do that. Signal is a secure privacy-focused messaging app that offers end-to-end encryption and has minimal data collection. And so there's some organizations that do it where if you need to have a more kind of sensitive conversation as well, or there's information that needs to be conveyed, and you need to make absolutely sure that it's secured, or that it needs to be ephemeral, Signal is a good option in that regard. And
all right, so yeah, so we've shared a lot so far. We have a lot more to go, but we are curious to hear from you. We haven't covered every conceivable tool in the universe that's out there, so we're curious to hear what's working for you. What would you add to the list? And so lots of folks are in the chat. We would love to be able to learn from one another beyond just what we're sharing. So if you have something that you want to add to the chat, I am going to invite you to right now just drop whatever you have in the chat, and let us know what you would add to the list. And so with that, we're gonna go back to Jason.
All right, so we're going to talk a bit about some automations that are here. So one thing is, a couple of them are around, if this then that is a classic one around if you're creating small automations or personal ones, and then as you work up the stack, that Zapier is a very handy tool for automating various tasks. So an example here is that if you have a submission in Jotform that you can also send an SMS. An implementation that I oversaw was every time a donation may come in, send a Slack message to our fundraising team to give real-time feeds so that the stewardship process can begin even sooner, so that you don't have to necessarily wait for the cycle of finance to process the donation, and then the report gets generated on the fundraising side. And finally, Power Automate. A very powerful tool with regards to automation. And there are lots of different possibilities there, ranging from email to document management to approval processes, you name it. Definitely check it out if you're interested in automations in that regard. So that we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about AI and some of the possibilities that are available there. But before we jump into it, I did want to share about some of the fine print with regards to some of the AI disclosures. And so when you read through the fine print of, in particular, this is OpenAI, that there are some policies that they have that are listed in the fine print around, if you're writing like a book or something, or a publication using something like ChatGPT, is that the fine print indicates that there should be an indication that there was using. They should acknowledge that some of GPT was used, and also that a human must take ultimate responsibility for the content as well. And they have some suggested text here in their fine print. So I just want to draw folks' attention to that. The other thing to keep in mind too is making sure that the organizational values of your organization align with AI as well. So at the end of the day, it's making sure that you're using this as a tool to effectively mission. And also, I want to flag that an awareness of the opt-out options. So again, this is more in the fine print, where particular to OpenAI is that there is a very specific form that you can fill out to opt using that's submitted to things like ChatGPT from being included in the training for their models. But that is you do have to submit a form in order to do that as well. And if you're concerns about folks about AI and such, and just want to share this quotation from Robert Berry around, don't worry, you will not be replaced by artificial intelligence. You will, however, may be replaced by people who know how to use artificial intelligence. So all that to say is that this is it can be an impact multiplier in this regard, but it's making sure that we're not completely ignoring it either, but be smart about it, and making sure that we have definite use cases and mitigating some of the risks in that regard. And so I'll toss over to Meico here.
Awesome. So the first up here in this category is ChatGPT. So this is one of the many generative AI tools that is popping up. And for folks that aren't familiar with this, it's a free tool that you can use. So you can sign up, just sign up for an account, and you have access to be able to play around with it. There's also a paid version now. And to know that this is a moving target in the sense that it's continuing to evolve. And so the pricing structure might change, and how the platform is able to perform and what it's able to do is continuing to evolve and to change as well. So I just want to share a few ways that I have used ChatGPT, and then I'm curious to hear from folks in the chat if you use ChatGPT or a similar tool, how you have used it and how it has been beneficial for you. And just a reminder to think about, just because a platform like ChatGPT can do a certain function doesn't mean that you should use it to do that. And so being very clear about your organizational values and your cultural values, and making sure that that's aligned with your internal policy in terms of, if you're going to use these platforms, how you're actually using them. So a couple of different ways that I have used them, including being able to ask direct questions that you would generally ask of a search engine like Google, but instead of sorting through a bunch of different sources, you might actually just be able to get a direct answer and have ChatGPT summarize the answers to a particular question that you are asking, for example. So as an example, I have on my fitness journey, and so one of the questions that I've asked ChatGPT is, based on how much I weigh and based on my current fitness goals, how much protein should I take or should I have in my diet every day, for example? That's an example of a direct question that if you were to ask Google that, you would have to sort through results and try to find that out yourself. But then Chat GPT is sort of a shortcut for that. But with that caveat, you want to make sure, as Jason pointed out, that you are actually double checking what the results of that are. In the work context, I have used this to summarize evaluation data. So I do a lot of training work and facilitation work for organizations. I do lots of pre and post evaluations. And so I've actually used ChatGPT to really say, okay, here's the response to this particular set of evaluation questions. ChatGPT, give me the top 5 things that came out of this particular response to this question. Or ChatGPT, can you give me the top 5 things that came out of this particular transcript recording that I did for this particular podcast? So those are some examples of ways that I've used it. So I'm curious to hear from folks in the chat how folks have used it. And Jason, I'm curious, before we move forward, are you seeing anything interesting that people are saying about how they're using ChatGPT or other things that you might want to point out before we move forward?
Yeah, I'm seeing here from Martin, sharing that using ChatGPT for looking up coding related things or creating, bash scripts. From Daryl, also talking about finding solutions for coding error. Danielle has shared that using it to inputting existing published articles and creating talking points for engagement in social media posts. So a wide variety of usage that folks are sharing also in the chat.
Awesome. All right, so that's awesome. And why don't we go ahead and keep moving here, mindful of the time and having to jump off in a few moments. So let's see what else we got here.
Yeah, so along the lines of ChatGPT as well, is that there's actually behind the scenes or kind of direct API access in what's called the OpenAI playground. So this is a bit, it's not, you have to sign up for an account in order to access this, and then you get access to actually more models and more features where there are other GPT models. So the 3.5 turbo model, as well as GPT-4, as well as additional modes of text completion are available. So there's screen here what it looks like, but the keyword that you're looking for is the open playground. That will give you some more direct API access. And it also brings the cost down in that I believe the GPT 3.5 model in its current state is about something like $20 and can generate estimated about like 7 million words or so. So that's something to keep in mind. The other with GPT-4 is that the next iteration of it will have the option for GPT to actually process images. So here's an example of, take a look at this this meme image and describe why it's funny. So there are some future possibilities here around interesting use cases around visual accessibility and using AI to aid in that as well. And also, I think it's helpful to think through like what will be possible for your organization if you are able to process, visual imagery as well to kind of feed into your workflows. So it's helpful to be aware of that and to keep an eye out on some of those possibilities. And I'll flip back to you, Meico.
And this one is a two-parter. So for folks that are not familiar with Canva is a web-based graphic design platform. It's meant to be a simple approach to graphic design, including for folks that might be novices, folks that aren't professional graphic designers. And so there are lots of templates, and it essentially makes it easier for you to do things without having to be a master person in Photoshop or to have to buy expensive software to be able to do it. And so one of the things that's really interesting is that the integration of AI into Canva with the Magic Write feature essentially allows you to if you're generating content for social media for your organization, for example, and you want a checklist of things based on a particular topic, those are things that you can have it do. So this is an example that Jason put in here, which is, have it generate a list of 5 things to pack before going on vacation. These are things that are generated by Canva Magic, right? And of course, you being a human in the process, you have to double check that and wordsmith it and correct it and all those things. But nonetheless, it can help with starting the process as you're developing and actually writing content.
All right, next up is, so this is for folks who made an NVIDIA card or a late model NVIDIA card, is that NVIDIA Broadcast just recently released a feature that allows you to maintain virtual contact. So if you're giving a presentation or looking elsewhere when you're on video, this will actually virtually kind of ensure that your eyes are focused and looking straight out at the audience. So that's something to be aware of for folks who may be using a video card on their machines. And I expect that as technology continues to develop, that this may see wider availability across different cards as well.
And no, we're not using it now. Someone asked about that. No, we're not using it now.
I'm actually looking way off there. No, I have an NVIDIA card on my laptop. Next up is AI image generation for things like mockups. This would be using some of the systems like a DALL-E or Stable Diffusion. Fully acknowledge that there are also some concerns around copyright as well that have been raised with regard to using image generation, and so as an organization, have to be aware of that in terms of how organizations choose to use or not use this technology moving forward. But it is here. There are additional options like Adobe Firefly, and that I believe Adobe's models are trained on licensed images as well. So that's something to check out if you're looking for AI image generation. So what this is you essentially put a description of the image that you need, say for like stock imagery, you'll actually create it on the fly. So in the case on the left, it's like I need an image of someone putting mail into a mailbox, and then it'll actually just create this in a few seconds, or children playing on a playground. So instead of having to search through tons and tons of stock imagery, that you can generate tons and tons of on the fly images as well. Moving on to video and audio, and over to Meico.
All right, awesome. So I talked about this batch of tools earlier. So Vidyard, Loom, Bonjoro, Vidcast, they're all very similar. They're the competitors to one another. And I think I've used 3 out of the 4, and they're all very similar. And so again, this is a tool that you can use to really have it be a shortcut to writing a LinkedIn email. You can be creative about how you're sending thank yous to donors, for example. You can use it on the front end and the back end of meetings to follow up with folks and to really make the meetings time where you're meeting synchronously more meaningful. For folks that are doing technical support, using it as a way to provide a voice and a face, and also walk through and help people troubleshoot whatever it is they might be experiencing in real time. So very powerful platforms. And I think Bonjoro is the latest one that I've used, where they actually have a plugin, I know for Gmail, where you can actually streamline the process of actually creating the video and sending it via email. You can actually just press the button in your email composer, record your video, and then have it send right there automatically. So there are different interesting ways that you can use these platforms to streamline workflows depending on what your intention is.
And next up is Windsor and trymaverick.com. So what this is some of you may be familiar with recording video messages already, maybe using it for outreach to donors or supporters, or engaging with your wider community. What this is it's a mail merge for video. So what this is that when you record your video, you will say a filler word in there, and then you would actually upload a list of videos you need generated, and it would actually have produce videos for you that would automatically be like, "Hi, Jason," and then include the message, "Hi, Meico," and then include the message, "Hi, Martin," include the message. So this is something that is kind of the what I've seen is seems to be a next iteration of mass-produced video for engagement and personalization as well. And back over to Meico.
Awesome. So Descript is a new tool that I'm excited about. It's very similar to Otter AI and to some of the other tools that are out there that provide transcription for meetings and for videos, both synchronously and asynchronously. And the cool thing I love about this is that it has some cool features, such as allowing you to, on the back end, remove filler words. So it remove filler words from the transcript, remove filler words from the recording. So for example, I am in the process of releasing a new podcast, and my team is looking at this as a possibility for being able to remove all the ums and the yeses and all of those things, removing those things, including you can create custom keywords to do that. And one of the other features that we're really excited about is the possibility of being able to do what I would describe as inline editing. In other words, if you are looking at the transcript for a recording, you can edit the transcript as if you're editing like a Word document, and then it makes those same edits in the audio or the video version. And so for folks that are interested in that, and that possibility, I saw someone earlier asked about video and comparing it to one of the features in TikTok. This could be a tool that might help you do part of that process. So we're excited about using that, and thank you, Jason, for introducing us to this possibility.
Yeah, my pleasure. And next up, we have Descript's overdub. So this is very similar to what Meico just mentioned. However, you can create a voice clone. So you can train a voice model in your voice. And if you actually need to create things around like, short audio messages or even longer, audio dubs and things, that Descript will actually have your voice model, and you just input the text and it'll use your voice to create the text for you. For that regard, in audio form. So this is helpful, if you are looking to produce a whole bunch of audio things, and that it may be more helpful to train an audio model to do it, to also save your voice a little bit, as well as also making edits along the way too. And yes, Amanda, totally acknowledge that. When used for bad, using for phone scams as well. So another reason for, on the flip side, on the security tools, making sure we're using things like multi-factor, but also that having internal procedures around verifying that even people who are on the phone with you. I do have folks. For verification, sometimes send me a photo of you holding up a couple of fingers as well to verify that you are who you are. Or let's hop on a quick conversation. So, okay, so for transcription, for those of you who may be working on large bodies of text or audio that you need converted into text, here are some providers that can do transcription around Descript, Rev, Otter AI are common ones that are out there. I did want to highlight a couple of models that are out there that if you're concerned about, like, say, more sensitive audio that you don't actually want uploaded to the internet, check out things like the OpenAI's Whisper model. So this does require a bit more custom coding and setup. That if you use the Whisper model, it's a audio model that has been trained on a whole bunch of different audio that has been submitted and collected across the internet. It's decently accurate, and you can actually self-host it, but it does require additional lift and setup in order to have that work. One that recently came out was Ermine.ai. So this is another kind of use case where you can access it via the browser, and it'll download the model, and you can actually disconnect your browser from the internet at that point, and it does it entirely within the browser for voice recognition as well, with timestamps and such. So a whole bunch of different options here with regards to transcription as well. So moving on to task and calendar management. Here's a couple of screenshots of Reclaim and Use Motion, which I referred to earlier for the task management as well as the time blocking elements. I'm not going to spend too much time on it because I did speak about it earlier with regards to using it for making sure that you're not overloading your calendar or saying yes to too many things, because this will actually give you an alert where it's like, hey, I understand that you want to take on this additional task that's going to that you've allocated for a couple of extra hours. However, you literally do not have any additional working hours in the next couple of weeks to complete this. So this helps you keep a better track of some of your available working hours as well as task management. And some examples around the scheduling with Calendly and Use Motion. So some of you may already be using Calendly and Use Motion as well. This is an example of the copy and paste for the kind of thing that it would actually auto-generate that text that you can copy and paste and drop into an email. Friends, for your question about does either of this sync to Outlook, the answer is yes. Microsoft Booking. So that's something to be aware of too, that this is available bundled with Office 365 or Microsoft 365 as well. And so, if you're on the Microsoft suite, it's baked in from a functionality standpoint. And for O365, I think it's A3, A5, E1, E3, E5, like just it's there for the different packages. So the keyword that you're looking for is Microsoft Bookings, and you can set up your available calendar at times, and people can book directly there. Correspondingly, there's Google appointment slots. So Google has this baked in as well. And here's a dropdown. When you're in Google Calendar, you can create an appointment schedule, and you can do this with multiple colleagues as well. So if you're constantly having to like juggle calendars, going back and forth, like, when are you available, and having to send all that in, is that you can actually create appointment schedules that be like, hey, find all the times that both Jason and Meico are both available, and then you can send that link to folks that you are looking to meet with, and it'll take care of the scheduling. One thing to be aware of though is that it will book it into the person who created the appointment schedules calendar. If you have additional people booked in that calendar, that you need to make sure that you have something set up to forward that the invite over to them after it is booked. And finally, to close out things, we have just a few minutes remaining, some browser add-ons and some of our favorites here. So one of my favorites is Toby for browser tab organization. So what Toby is that if you find yourself opening the same tabs over and over again for your day-to-day work, or let's say if you're having to do things like demos and you're having to manually open like 10 different tabs and manually type it, or selecting your bookmarks, Toby is a really powerful tool that will allow you to create collections, so that if you're doing if you're opening the same 4 tabs or 5 tabs or something every morning, is that you can bundle it all into the things that you visit daily, and then press a single button. It'll open all the tabs simultaneously, so it saves you those precious moments that you're having to do like multiple times a day. So it's super helpful if you're working on, let's say, a large project in which you have 10 tabs open, and you don't have to like reopen it day after day or multiple times a day. Is that you can save it as a workspace within Toby, press a single button, it'll launch all 10 tabs simultaneously as well. So Toby is an extension that's available on Chrome. And thank you, Jill, for also on Microsoft Edge having the groups and collections features. And also, if you ever find yourself that you're constantly looking at different articles throughout the day, but you don't have time to like actually read it during the day, and you need to save it for later. A classic is a Pocket for saving articles for later reading, to make things a little bit more manageable in that regard, so that you're not reading it, in the moment, because during the course of the workday, you may have other things to do. So this is to help maintain focus as well. So our call to action to you as well, like this has been a great sharing here, where thank you so much to everyone who's participated in the chat, and also shared a whole bunch of the resources you've come across with everyone here. For the call to action is, make sure you join the N10 discussion groups as well, where folks are constantly sharing different apps, tools, and tactics as well. And so this is a great place for the N10 community to get together and also continue sharing beyond this session here. And Bridget, you read my mind. This is actually for the resource from mindfultechie.com/free is a whole bunch of additional details around additional mindfulness apps and productivity apps as well. And we will be sharing this slide deck via the collaborative notes. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to Meico and I. Add us up on LinkedIn, and stay in touch. And I'm so grateful for all of you for attending. I believe we had just over like 90 participants through the course of this session, and yeah, really enjoyed this. And thank you all for your active participation. And that's it from us. Thank you.